All right, hello and welcome to another episode of the Two Stewards Show.
We keep doing episodes, Mark, but we never get to the point.
Well, that's the point of a podcast, isn't it? You never really get to the point.
Oh, but now we're going to get to the point.
But we are going to get to the point
episode.
With this one. We talked about tenant screening last time, and
no, we didn't. We were going to.
We were going
almost
to.
Got there.
We talked about a lot of it. We set the foundation. So we're going to get into some more specific.
You need a firm foundation, before you can build a good house that stands for a long time. Yeah, that's biblical.
It is. So I think we set that foundation.
No foundations of sand in this podcast.
That's right. So no, but we did talk about finding the right place to make sure you set yourself up for success, basically, with the right tenants.
Yeah.
So once you've done that, you've got the place, you've renovated it, it's nice, and you guys have your kind of niche at Good Stewards of higher end places with higher end finishes that you've done. Like you've done work to. It's not just grandma's cabin that or cottage that you're shoving people in. So you've got some thought into it, and we'll work through that. So we talked about one specific thing after that, which was starting your advertising process. You talked about Facebook. You like to use Facebook.
I don't really like to use Facebook. I don't really like Facebook, but
you don't
like I said, I have a love-hate relationship with Facebook. So love in the sense that like all of our tenants or 90% of our tenants come from Facebook Marketplace.
Yeah.
But hate in terms of actually having to go on Facebook and deal with this. So I don't know if you're like a Facebook guy, if you like social media, but not huge on it myself. So
oh yeah, no, I love scrolling for hours.
Yeah,
just doom scrolling, I think they call that now. I've seen that lately, and it's kind of true. Like it's nihilistic scrolling for no good reason
until you pause on something and that shows up more. Yeah. So we use Facebook Marketplace to find tenants. Now we were, I guess once you get an ad, right? Mm-hmm. You post an ad on Facebook Marketplace. And have you ever done this before? Like, there's a little bit to it because you do need a lot of info about the property. You need some pictures, but you put the ad out there, right? Now you're going to get a bunch of tenants responding, or a bunch of applicants, or what do you call it? I guess prospective tenants.
Yep.
So Facebook is actually a good tool to use to find. It's one of the tools that we use, but it's a good tool to help find market rents as well.
Yeah.
So if you like, that's another problem. Like we rent units all the time, so we kind of have a sense of like where our units should be in the market based on what other ones went for and whatever. And people's general sentiment when they come to viewings and stuff, you can kind of get a sense like, is it way out of market rent? But if you're just doing this for the first time, like or whatever, you don't do it very frequently.
Yeah.
It can be like, okay, what should I price my unit at? And I've talked to people too lately who like, they're renting their unit for 10 years and they have one rental unit or something. And then they have the tenant moving out and they're like, what do I list this for or whatever? And, the thing is like less than half of what someone on the market would pay for this, right?
Uh-huh.
Like their eyes are just like, what? Like what happened? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that's without even doing any renovations to the unit or any fix-ups, right? So you post it online, you get a bunch of responses, and these people are going to be like, a lot of the times it's going to pop up in their feed, or it's going to pop up on the map, or in their search for a rental. And Facebook has this really frustrating thing where it asks you, or basically it's just like a preset message. Like if you want to respond to this rental ad as a tenant, you click, hey, is it still available? Or I can even pull it up right here. Like what someone says, right? It's like, hey, is this unit available?
Yeah.
It's like, yes, it's still available. And I think every landlord listening is like, right? But I could just see tenants getting there like, 10 o'clock at night, and they get out on their couch and they pull open their laptop. It's like, I want to find a place to rent. And you're just going to click, is it available? Is it available? Is it available? Is it just go down the list, right? So we get a lot of responses, right? And then, when you're marketing, you're trying to determine, okay, is this person serious?
Yep.
Like, do they actually want to rent, or they just click the button for fun? Or like, are they a tire kicker and they just want to see the place, or like, you know, are they sometimes you get like leasing agents or like people who are like, you know, can I represent you in leasing this house, or like other company, like, so there's all kinds of different responses you're going to get to your marketing of your ad, right? You're not just going to get great quality tenants. So when you start clicking down the responses, you're going to get all kinds of different stuff, right? So that's generally the first step of really screening people, right? Because you've bought a house in a good area, you've kind of eliminated a lot of problems there already, right?
Yeah.
You've done some work to it, you've got it, whatever, and it's ready to go. You've got great pictures. We can talk about that a different time, but yeah, you got some great compelling pictures of what you're presenting to the audience, and you've made a list of features and benefits about this property, and you post it up there, and now you get these responses, and the responses are like all over the place, and that's generally your first interaction with people, right?
Yeah.
Like until that point, you've just been working on the product that you're presenting to them. So like we said before, like a lot can be done there, but once you get these responses, it's like, okay, you know, how now what? And that's where I think people freeze, and they're like, okay, do I just tell everybody how great this property is? Do I, you know, just start hitting, yes, it's available. Yes, it's available. Because there is an automated response back, and you can backfire. But there's algorithms too for Facebook. Like if you start clicking automated responses, or you start using copy paste, like, you know, they don't like that so much. And yeah, it doesn't bode well for, your future use of the algorithms. And like, it's, that's my love-hate relationship right there.
Yeah.
But yeah, generally speaking, like their Facebook profile will show up. So if you're advertising a place, for example, that says, you know, no pets.
Yep.
And the picture is a dog or a cat. Well, right away, you can make an assumption that they own a dog or a cat, or they either are a dog or a cat.
That's my assumption, is that it's actually a dog looking for a place.
Which I guess it's not out of the realm. Like if they want to identify as a dog. But I mean, like that.
The worst one I had, it was in the picture, it was 5 ants.
Ants. Like,
yeah, ants looking for a place. And I'm like, sorry, guys, this is not suitable. But then they said, oh, no, we've got 5 more ants. I'm like, okay, then you could be good 10 ants.
Oh, I did not see where that was going.
But
oh, man. Yeah, I've never had those ants before. We've had dogs, cats, birds, like,
yeah,
whatever. But what I'm saying is, like, you're going to go through these responses, and you're going to go, you know. Oh, man. Mark, your dad jokes.
I tell you.
And right away, you can start to judge someone's character, right? Because that, like, you presented a unit to them. You did your best in articulating what's so great about this unit, even with the pictures, everything, right? You did your best. And they're articulating back to you who they are, right? So a lot of the times, like, we'll take their name and we'll Google it, or we'll take their name, we'll look them up on other social media, or we'll look them up on Facebook, and like, who are these people? You know, like, what can I find out about them? Is there something that jumps out that's newsworthy, that's like, you know, okay, well, like, that person's a criminal, or is that person like, you know, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
There's so many different things that you never know you can find. And as a landlord, you're really like, it's the risk is yours.
Yep.
Right? Like, once you accept a tenant, like, they can stay there for as long as they want until they want to move out, right? Like, it's not like there's only limited things you can do to get them out. So you got to be very careful, and this is the first step. So I'll just go through a quick high-level process of, like, so you have this almost pre-screening system where you look through the people who have messaged you. Yep. Then you have, like, the time where you actually message them back and discuss with them about seeing the property or whatever it is. And then, generally speaking, we would invite people to view the property, because before we do any applications, before we do any kind of further screening, we want to actually meet them
Right.
So we'll basically have a questionnaire that we send to them to say, look, like, you know, you're interested in viewing the property. Let's set up a time to meet. In order, like, prior to the meeting, I want you to fill out these questions just so that, like, I know who you are and, you know, if you're a real person and if you're serious about this and if you're qualified, right? Because you have to kind of pre-qualify these people. And income is probably the biggest thing because you're not at the stage where you can verify income yet. Like, but you do want to know like what their stated income is. So generally we just ask, like, you know, what is your stated income or your household income? Gross, just to give a picture of their financial situation. It doesn't give a full picture because we don't know their credit, their other liabilities, or, you know, car loans or whatever they have, right? But it does give a sense of like, okay, is this person gainfully employed, or this family, like, do they have source of income somewhere? You know, are they saying that it's more than it is, or what, right?
Well, and you'll get the story, like from our limited experience doing long-term rentals, you get the stories then too, right?
Yeah.
When you ask about the income, it's like, well, you know, funny thing, it's here's what happened, right? And it's like, I just wanted to know the income. I didn't need your entire life history, but
so that's the sort of thing that we are totally open to, right? So when we're doing this process, like, we're trying to get that kind of engagement where, like, if there is an income number, that's great. That's what we want. But if there's a story behind it, that's what we want more than anything, right? Because
you like the stories.
Well, because that paints a better picture, right? And the main thing we do with that as a landlord, for all you tenants out there listening who want to, you know, game the system. Well, we ask these questions, but then we ask them before we do the viewing. But then when we go to the showing and we meet them in person, we'll kind of verify, right? Like, we'll test out their story. And it's a good judge of character, right? Like, is your story consistent?
Yep.
From what you said to me online or in our questionnaire form, and what you say in person? Or sometimes, sorry, we've had people who, like, you know, maybe the boyfriend messages us on Facebook and he sets up the viewing and he kind of gives some information about himself, and then he wasn't able to make it. The girlfriend shows up and she has like a lot of a different story, and you're like, that's interesting. Like, yeah. And so, like, those sorts of things are tools for the landlord to be able to, you know, screen through and sift through information that might be like misleading, or they might be misrepresenting their income or their financial situation, right? And right away, that's kind of a red flag for me anyways, right? And I'm like, I'm getting conflicting stories between what you said you had and what you saying now, and so stuff like that is like a big thing. I'm like,
so make sure you rehearse your stories, is what you're saying.
Yeah, rehearse your stories. If you're a tenant, get it down. Make sure that when you go into the showing, you say the same thing.
Well, it's interesting because, you know, the process you're describing isn't just like, I got a place, let's find someone to rent it out. Like, this is like you're dating.
Yeah.
Or doing like a job application, right? Where you're going through all these steps and verifying things, and kind of like it's a whole, it's a relationship. Yeah, and it's
like,
right?
progressive, right? Like, we start with basic stuff, like, can you respond to my Facebook ad in a legible manner? Like, okay, can you respond to it, first of all? Can you respond professionally, in a sense that, like, you know, like, what's your communication? Is your communication like, well, my previous landlord, he was a jerk? And it's like, okay. Right? Like, you get, and you'd be surprised what kind of responses you get, right? Like, you might have, well, thanks for responding. I'm leaving this situation because I hate the landlord. And it's like, right off the bat, you're okay. So anything you tell me beyond this thing, like, I'm supposed to be thinking that I'm going to be the landlord you're not going to hate. And like,
what are the chances?
Right? Yeah. So, what was I talking about?
I mean, if you're dating a girl and all she can talk about is her ex,
then,
you know, bad sign. So same rules apply, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. So, but then, so you have your very first initial contact when they message you back. Then you have like a pre-screening process that generally, like, there's different forms you can use. We created our own custom questionnaire on our website, like through our website. There's like, you use Google Forms or whatever, right? But once you get,
I'm sorry, I got to jump in. It just I just have this picture in my head now right? of Brent sitting there. And you remember the, I can't remember what it was called, but the dating shows they had back in the 70s and 80s. It'd be like, Bachelor number 1. I could just see you sitting there with 3 prospective tenants.
Yeah.
Tenant number 1, if I was stuck in a snowstorm,
what would you
do? Welcome to the real estate dating show with Brent Vanderwood.
Oh, man.
I'm gonna get you one of those skinny mics like Bob Barker.
And now it's Bob Barker. I don't know.
Okay. I had to get that out there. It was just bursting me apart.
Okay. That's before my time, Mark. I'm like 90s, Okay, so we got our initial point of contact, like message you back. You got the screening form, which you can make your own form, whatever. Come up with a list of questions.
Yeah.
What is your, like, how many people are looking to live in this unit? How long are you looking to rent for? Why are you moving? Just simple questions like, are you employed, or like, what is your household income? Do you have any other, like, whatever there is questions that go too far too.
Yeah. Are there things you can't ask?
Oh, there is. I'm probably not an expert at this because we just kind of go through the list and make sure that nothing you can't ask at the time when we made the form, and now we just use the form and it works great.
Yeah.
But
I mean, generally, you don't, can't be things that would be considered
like,
discrimination.
Are you a white person?
Yeah.
Like, no, you can't ask racist questions like that, right? So, you can't discriminate openly in the form, and that's not the point of it, right? The point is just to get a sense of like whether or not this person, I think even with like sending out a form initially, is can you fill out a form the way that the landlord asks you to, right? And that's just a sign of like some people don't agree to do things that you ask them to do, and that's like, okay, well, would you take care of the house if I asked you to, like, you know what I mean? Like, if you can't fill out a form, then, and you'd be surprised like who puts up a stink about these things, and it's tough to deal with. But
and you're kind of setting the tone, or at least gauging what the tone of your future relationship will be like.
It's going to be a long-term relationship.
If this person is combative and just a pain in the butt, and like, here's a note to prospective tenants, right? We're expecting that, or Brent is expecting that in these interactions, you're going to put your best foot forward. So everything you do and say and how you present yourself is going to be like the absolute best that you can do. And so that probably the future relationship will be like, you'll be at 80% of how you've presented yourself. So if you're presenting yourself as a jerk, or as someone who's just not communicative, or just not desirable in general, we know probably that you're going to be even worse to deal with a year down the road once you're comfortable.
If there's a problem. Right? Because this is like when the unit's perfectly ready to go and like everything's fixed and looks nice and whatever.
It's the honeymoon phase.
That is a good illustration. Because that can be like this period of time right after you get your nice unit all ready and people think it's all glorious, and the minute there's like some ants walking around, or some
5 or 10
5 or 10 ants walking around, and the like garbage is accumulating, and like something happens and you're like, I can't deal with this, I gotta text my landlord, and then it's just there's a falling out. So that's the kind of initial process I recommend people do, and it works really well. Create a form, create some sort of questionnaire that you can just send with basic, simple questions to, check if they're, first of all, competent enough to fill out the form and responsible enough, and that they give you information that's not misleading or whatever. And then that's a very general pre-qualification to, okay, now let's have a showing, because that's a time commitment from you. It's a time commitment from them. If they're obviously have no income, or they have very low income compared to what you're renting it for, or whatever flags you might raise in your initial conversations and questionnaire forms. You don't want to waste your time. You don't want to waste their time. And I don't want to sound like rude or mean or anything, but like, we don't want to have situations where Like someone drives out from, you know, the other side of the city and you drive out from here and you meet at the property, and within 10 seconds, you know, like this is not what you should be renting, and this is not going to work because, you know, it just, like it's obvious, right?
Yeah. Just a waste of time for both people.
Yeah. And like we've had units actually in recent past too, and we're still dealing with issues like this where we post the unit and we put the location in, and then you end up with like another address similar in a different area or like an hour away or something. Like we've had units in St. Catharines that we post and they show up in Markham or something. So really? We got tenants come for the viewing. And one tenant wanted to come from Markham to view it because they thought it was, and the other person was like, you know, hey, I'm at the property, and they send me a picture of the property, and it's obviously not the property. It's like, okay. So stuff like that you have to be aware of too, and like just make sure you're communicating openly, like, hey, this is the address, like set up a showing, book a time. So generally what we do to get showings done is I think this is more common with a lot more people, but I used to do these open house style things.
Right.
Where you basically say, look, on you know, Friday afternoon or Saturday morning between 10 and whatever, we're doing a showing. If you want to attend, let me know, and we'll love to see you there. And then you do a confirmation email closer to the time, and then you end up having like 5 or 10 people show up, or sometimes more, depending on how crazy it is.
Yeah.
And depending on how you price your unit. And all these people show up, and then you eventually get someone to rent. And just because we're working more with like higher end units, and generally speaking, like professionals, higher end clientele, like they prefer and they really like the vibe of having like a one-on-one viewing.
Right.
So we've kind of altered our strategy a little bit to have like specific time slots when people can come, but we generally try and group them, right? So like if you're doing showings as a landlord and you're getting all these responses from your ads and you're trying to fill a unit quickly or whatever, you don't want to be like, hey, you want to do Friday afternoon at 7, you want to do Saturday morning at 2, and whatever, like whatever, right? And then not at 2 on Saturday morning, that's not a thing. Yeah, Saturday mornings are pretty late. Hey, you wake up late, and then
What's your cancellation rate like? Or no show rate?
So probably, well, that's another thing we should highlight, because probably it varies, but probably 50%,
right?
60%.
Even for a high end unit.
Yeah. So we had 4 showings booked and confirmed for yesterday or 2 days ago, and 2 showed up.
Yeah.
Out of the 4.
Did they call?
No. One message on Facebook after saying, oh, sorry, I forgot. We subsequently did a viewing with them. We did have another person that we had invited that never confirmed, that we left the option open that could come. But sometimes you get that, right, where you send an invite out and you don't get confirmation, but it's within the time frame you're at the house, so you might as well
hang out,
be there. But yeah, you do get a significant number of no-shows. It can be very frustrating as a landlord. Like if you show up and you have 1 or 2 and you think they're good and no one shows up, and you drove all the way here just to turn all the lights on and make it real nice, and like, oh. But yeah, that's part of the process too, right? And then it's part of the learning, because once you understand that like your time is involved and your time is valuable, and if you're going to commit to showing something, like you want to make sure that they commit to their end of the deal too, right? So and that's usually a sign if somebody doesn't show up, that like, yeah, you don't want to be in a relationship like that either, right?
Yep.
Like if we said and we agreed that we would do this, and we confirmed that on the day, and we agreed that this was going to happen, and that doesn't happen, and you didn't notify me or whatever, then I just don't want to deal with that in the future, right?
Yeah. And so what's your opinion on like when rent is due? You know, is it going to be the same kind of thing? Like,
I said I was going to pay the rent.
Said I was going to do it, but
I didn't really feel like paying the rent that day. Yeah. So now that's a sign that like things probably aren't going to go well, right? Especially when collecting the rent.
And we've had the same thing too, right? But like you said, somebody, if they message you afterwards, say, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I forgot."
That's
like,
okay.
It happens.
Yeah, I know
we get
exactly.
that. But generally, they're going to try and make
like
up
I've
for that.
forgotten to go to viewings too. Like, you know, I don't know how many viewings or showings I've done, but like I've forgotten like a couple times, and it's just like, oh, I was supposed to be there. And actually, it was funny because the one time I forgot
Yeah.
was the time when the guy was in the other across the city at the other house. I was like, oh good, yeah, I didn't have to drive all the way to Markham across the city just to show some. So that worked out, but yeah, it happens too, right? So you have to have grace for that situation. But if it's blatant, like I just set up a viewing and you're wasting my time, then yeah, we don't have time for that, right? So
ain't nobody got time for that.
No, exactly. So, and there's so many things we could talk about the actual viewings, like how to prepare for them, how to get the house ready for how to, and a lot of the stuff is kind of basic. Like you turn the lights on, make sure it smells good in there, make sure whatever, like, you know, you're not dressed in something that is going to be off-putting or whatever, right? Like you come out of your sewage job and you, I don't know. But yeah, tenants, based on your pictures in your ad or the way you describe your ad, the tenants will be expecting certain thing,
type
right?
Of landlord
and
as well.
Yeah, you don't want your pictures to be this glossy thing, and then you show up and this unit's like really dingy and smelly and musty and like doesn't jive. So you want to be realistic and you want to be able to present your property really well. But the other part of it is like that I find really exciting, and maybe I just interested in it, but the relationship side of it, where like you get an opportunity to meet a new person who's looking for the services that you're providing, and it's a relationship, right? It's like, okay, well, this is what I have to offer. Like I have this house, this is what I do, this is like, do you like it, does it suit your needs?
Yeah.
And I always try and see like, okay, where are they from, like where are they going, does this house make sense to be part of their story, right? Like if it's like some people are just absolutely desperate, they need a place, whatever, and that's usually something for me that's off-putting. It's like, well, okay, is that what you told the last guy? Like, how do I know this is the particular place? Like, you know, are you just telling that to everybody so you can get a place?
Yeah.
Is there something that is going on that I don't know about? And yeah, it takes a certain personality, I guess, to be like an objective judge of character and not fall for different emotional stories about different things, right?
Yeah.
Because the minute you do, your investment becomes less of a business, which is what it technically is, right? And more of, you know, you're subsidizing their story, or you're helping them out in some way. Beyond just providing them with the services that your business does, right? Like your business, or like as an investor, as somebody who has a real estate like rental, you're providing housing, and that's your job. Like if you want to go above and beyond and like help subsidize somebody's rent, then that's a different
do that on your personal time,
or account for that in your budget, right? Like, hey, I'm really looking to help someone out here. I'm willing to put this below market rent for the right kind of person that I want to help out.
Yeah.
And like we've seen that too, like whatever, we help various people out in tough situations, right? And a lot of the time it's temporary, right? It's like, hey, I need a place for 5-6 months.
Yeah.
This is my situation. And like if we know what the situation is, we can verify that. Like once in a while we'll make an exception because that's what we want to do, but we have to have the financial means to do that. We have to be prepared for that, right?
Yeah.
Generally speaking, you don't want to just blindly go into that situation, and that's your game plan with this rental property.
Yeah, because and I found that too. Invariably, it ends badly.
And they take advantage. Like the tendency is for them to take advantage of it, right?
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so you've gotten the place ready. You got good pictures. You've had showings. Presumably, people show up to the showing. So now you've got, I don't know, let's say you got 4 people that potentially could rent this place. Where do you go from there? They've answered some basic questions.
Yeah. So that's the thing that in the last couple years, like it's been a crazy rental market, right? So you're going to get, generally speaking, you're going to get a lot of attention and a lot of, like if your unit's priced right, you're going to get a lot of attention, a lot of people who want to live there.
Yeah.
And I find it frustrating as a landlord or like difficult, I guess, not frustrating. It's like difficult to, how do you decide? And like, how do you answer the criteria? If somebody says, oh, hey, how do you decide who rents your place? It's like, I don't know. How would you decide? Like, what if you had 30 people knocking on your door tomorrow? Like, would you just pick the first one? Like, how do you know, right? So I think that comes down to like, what is your goal with the property? And so generally what we do is, if let's say we had 4, let's use the example, we have 4 people who are interested. Usually it's fewer, actually.
Right.
Usually it's like 2 to 3. That sounds like not very much difference, but like, yeah, it takes a bit to get 4 qualified people through the property and apply and whatever, like be serious, and that you are serious in dealing with them. Because generally speaking, you can kind of narrow it down. And like, so once you get into application processing, like there's a little bit of cost and time involved in that as well. So like you have to do credit checks, background checks, or whatever. So,
well, we should go through that.
Yeah.
Specifically.
But I'm just saying, like, there's cost involved with that. So you don't necessarily want to have like 50 applicants and then have to screen them all, because it's not the best situation. Like what you're trying to do is find a tenant for the property, right? So like the more you can narrow it down. So generally what we try to do is, let's say we get 4 people are interested, we'll send out applications. And that application is just the standard application form. I guess like the OREA form, Ontario real estate form that they use. You can make your own up too. But there's a list of questions, and basically you're trying to get information about their income, their like their past rental history and their employment history. Like any kind of credit issues or debt, like, you know, they have a car, what kind of payments do they have? So those sorts of things. And that's very standard. Like you basically have to fill that out anywhere you go. But that's the information we ask for, and you get that back. And there's other, like there's websites and stuff that do this for you. Yeah. But we like to do it manually because we like the back and forth process with the tenants and actually building a relationship, right? Like, oh, hey, you're missing this document. Can you provide that? No. Like, I like those interactions a little bit because while they take a little bit of time, they also add to the flavor of the relationship, and you can really build on that and learn from them, right? My wife does this. This is what I say in the showing. Say my wife does the screening. So maybe we should have her on the podcast. But should have said that. Yeah. Then I do the showing part of it generally, is she'll do the screening, and it works well because we actually have, and that's something probably recommend actually at this point is like we have 2 people looking at every tenant objectively, right? So like she's never met them before, right? And I've met them, so I vouch for them. In the sense that like, hey, I've done some pre-screening. Hey, I've done a showing. I think these people would great fit. Here's their application. And she takes that data, having never met them before. And saying, so if you have that dynamic with 2 different sets of eyes, that right away is like an objective opinion, because, you know, if she were to meet them as well, she might have the same opinion as me, but having no knowledge of it, it's just like, okay, well, does this data line up with this data that you're saying to me? Yeah. So that's the kind of the way that we do it in our company, and with our clients is we'll take that kind of 2-sided approach to it, and then so she'll do like calling references, and that's a very important one. So once you get a form back, there's going to be like employer references on there, you know, past like personal references as well, landlord references, and we try to call all those people. Yep. And if we don't get a hold of them, we contact the tenant and say, hey, why can't we get a hold of them? Because that is really like how you're going to learn from who these people are in reality. Like, how do they treat a place? Do they take care of it? Do they actually show up to work? You know, do they have problems with whatever, their job and their employer, right? Like, is there a good relationship? And you can generally get a sense from calling these people where things are at.
But there's only certain things you can ask an employer and a landlord as well, right?
Like, I got to pull up the list of questions. Maybe I should ask ChatGPT.
But if there's nothing to say they can't volunteer information, which I think often happens too, right?
Yeah. So some landlords, I've been asked to give landlord references, right, when tenants move out.
Yep.
And yeah, you always be truthful with what's going on. But some landlords might not even be aware that their tenants are moving out. So
Right.
I've had that backfire too, where like, wait, they're moving out? Like, wait, I'm going to lower their rent or whatever. Like they're really good,
okay.
right? And then they just convince them to stay or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, just those sorts of things. Maybe that doesn't happen every time, but that's something to be aware of.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's funny. It can backfire to call references,
Yeah.
but usually that's like leading practice, right? Make sure you're calling these people, and yeah, be wise about what questions you ask. Like just Google it. I'm not going to give a whole list of questions because I don't have them, but
Yeah.
we have a sheet and we do it. It works really well. And then once you've kind of verified those, you can go through credit check. So that's looking at their financial history and their current status.
Do you pull that, or do you get them to pull it?
So sometimes we'll request them to pull it, or they'll pull it. A lot of times, like tenants if they're searching and they're serious, like they might pull it themselves and they'll send it to us. So we'll take that. But generally, once they get through the application process, we'll pull our own.
So you know that it's a legitimate credit check.
So, because we've got so many screenshots from Scotiabank, this and that, and it's like, your name's not even on this.
Yeah.
And then you Google good credit check for tenant screening process, and it's like the first Google picture. Yeah, but that'll give you a good picture of like how they pay their bills, right? And what kind of debt obligations they have. Do they have a lot of student debt or debt that they shouldn't have?
So are you pulling bank records then too, or requesting bank records?
So we just, in the application, we ask for proof of income, and that can be bank statements, a T4, or that can be like a job letter. And we'll just save one of those. And sometimes people will send all of them.
Right.
Or they send multiple because they really want it. So we get whatever, and then we'll process that information and look through it. And we're looking for consistency. We're looking for and credit's an interesting one, because somebody's story could line up and make total sense, and they look like a great tenant, and their credit's not good.
Right.
So generally, what the question is in my head is, well, do you know that your credit's not good? And like, are you aware, right?
Yeah.
And then what are you doing about it? Like, how did this happen? And like, what are you doing about it, right? And even if we're not going to rent to them, I want them to be able to answer those questions, right? And they leave our relationship. It's like, okay, well, this is not the right unit for you because like you clearly can't make your payments, but let's leave this relationship knowing that you know where you're at and what you can do to fix it. And
Right. They'll be in a better spot, hopefully.
Exactly. So we try to like do that for people too, like when we do get to the point where we're pulling credit. But yeah, if people can respond like, I know my credit's this because of this happened, and there's a justifiable reason and it makes sense and aligns up with everything else, then there's situations where we accept it. And a lot of the times we will go to get a co-signer. So that's like another step that you can employ if somebody just doesn't have the income or doesn't have the credit, or there's something about the application that you're a little bit questionable on.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the times people want the unit and they can afford the unit, but there's something, and they're like, well, what if I get a co-signer? And then it's like, okay, well, then the rent's guaranteed by somebody else. Then we're willing to have you. And so we've had situations like that as well, where you have a rental guarantor form signed, and then they guarantee. So
okay. So I saw something interesting the other day. It was a video on, I don't know, probably Facebook or something, but where this tenant had submitted a job letter, and there was just one little thing, like the guy did a really good job, one little thing on there that he was like, I don't know, something seems off. So he...
like the landlord was.
The landlord,
He was skeptical.
Yeah. So he posted this all online, and so they had the job letter. So he calls up the company and speaks to the purported HR head, and immediately they confirm, without him prompting, the information that's on the letter. So like length of length of employment and the exact dollar amount that they
Salary.
make.
Yeah.
Right? He's like, well, that's kind of weird
Yeah.
right? He's like, well, that's kind of weird because normally, they might have to look it up
Yeah.
at the very least.
Yeah.
And, if it's, 92,400, they might just say they make 92,000
Yeah.
instead of that
Yeah.
exact amount.
Yeah.
Right. So he did a little bit more investigating and looked at the website of the company and basically inspected certain elements and was like, oh, okay, this was made on Wix. Okay, let me go to Wix, and then looked up like, oh yeah, this is like the exact template that you would get off of Wix. They didn't even change anything. It's a basic template. And then like inspected some more of the elements, like a lot more than most landlords would do.
Yeah.
And anyways, in the end, he determined that this was like just a fake job letter and a fake company.
Yeah.
Company didn't actually exist or do anything. But and my thought is that this was probably a service that somebody offered. It probably wasn't just one tenant doing like a big elaborate thing.
Yeah.
But it's probably like they Googled,
How do I
fake.
Fake job letters.
Fake job letter, and like there's a lot of that. I've seen more of that as well, just on from other either realtors or landlords who are flagging this. Like just a ton of fraud going around. So you've got to be very diligent in how you're verifying this stuff, right?
100%. Like it is something that it's the risk of the landlord, and ultimately, like, there's only limited tools that you can use, right? Like, you can get a job letter if you suspect something's fishy. Like, you can dig into it, but whatever, if you can't prove anything, then like, what are you gonna do, right?
Yeah.
Like, you kind of go with your gut, and at the end of the day, like, it's your decision, right? You can say yes or no, and if you don't feel great about it, then
I mean, they could take it to court as well, right?
Yeah.
If they feel there's discrimination. So then you need to have a little bit of proof that you weren't. Well, I mean, everything's discrimination. Like you're discriminating based on their salary and everything.
Yeah,
credit.
What does that mean?
But illegal discrimination, I guess. So, like, do you hang on? This is something I don't really generally do, but do you hang on to any of these records?
We hang on to all the, not all the applications, generally the application that we accepted.
Okay.
So yeah, we've just found that like nothing has ever really come out of it, but we just hold on to the application that gets accepted and some of the supporting documents and emails or whatever.
Okay.
But like most of the time these are great tenants and like nothing ever happens, but that's, I do want to be prepared for whatever could happen. And that's like, I guess the final step is like, we don't generally do like a criminal background check. But that's another step too, right? To verify. And you mentioned there's like some websites where you can actually Google. Like there's quick searches you can do to actually get a sense without having to pay to do a criminal background check. But
yeah, CanLe is like the Canadian legal site. So if that person has ever been involved in either a civil or even a criminal judgment, the records are online. It's CanLe, CANLII, and you just Google their name, and hopefully it's not a super common name.
So everybody go there and type their name in and see if they would be able to get a rental
Google
unit.
yourself once in a while. You'd be surprised what shows up.
Yeah. So that would be kind of the final step, right? Like, if everything checks out and, they're not a criminal, they have credit that you can handle, and their income is at a ratio to the rent that you think is sustainable. And you can go down the list of the references that you've called and the story checks out. It's actually interesting because if you have, a lot of times we have like multiple people, right? It's like husband and wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, like two people staying together. And it, like, when you have that situation, you have more references to call and you have more of a story to flesh out, right? Because there's like, oh, why are you leaving? Why are you leaving? Why are you doing this? What, like, there's so many different things that you can piece together, and then usually those stories become more interesting. And like, fleshed out, and it's easier to catch things that might be like, okay, that doesn't make sense. Whereas if it's one person, then like you said, they could go on a website and just like find me a good job letter that is whatever, right? But if you can't ask their wife or whatever, like, is this job letter real? Yes, it's real. Okay, so yeah, I don't know if there's anything else specific to tenant screening that we want to get into.
No, I don't think so. But just we've talked about it, and people often mention it. You got to do your screening, but like, how do you actually do that, right? It's good to have, especially if you're a first time landlord, or you don't do it very often. You do it once every 5 years or 10 years, right? Like all these steps to go through, and but I think it's very important that you do that, especially given what we talked about last episode with delays at landlord-tenant board and just this sort of combative relationship in general between tenants and landlords. It doesn't have to be that way, but certainly perception that it is. And you don't want to be
I think for a lot of people like who go through this process, like they're going to do it, even if they don't do it frequently or they're doing it for the first time, like the chances of you getting a good tenant are pretty high. Yeah. Like even if you make some mistakes in the process, like not every tenant is a bad tenant, right? The ones that make the news, like there's so many good tenants out there, and there's so many people who need a place that like the chances of you getting a bad tenant are low, right. I would say, right? Unless you're doing like completely the opposite of the process we just kind of described, then like whatever, right? But what you're going to find is as you do more of this and more experience, and you're going to find little tricks of the trade, little things that like are red flags, right? Like the dog picture, for example. It's like, well, if you don't want pets in your unit and the guy posted out, like whatever, that's obvious, right? Yeah. So little things that come up as you're going, you're like, and then another benefit to it too is like, if you're doing this frequently, then a lot of the times there's like the benefit of, hey, you applied for this unit and we accepted the other guy, but you would be good, so why don't you rent in this house, right? Right. So that scale of having multiple units on the go at all times, like at least in our situation, and maybe not everybody has this, but like you can have some tenants who just don't get accepted here, not because they're bad tenants, but they're great tenants who just accepted someone else because there was 10 applicants or whatever. Yeah. And then you have a list of other properties or options, right? Yeah. So we find, when people come to us for this kind of service, we're able to juggle these things, and sometimes it works to their advantage because they'll get someone faster or like someone good right away that they wouldn't have got, right? Because you've done that whole process. Well, we've done the screening already, and they're ready to move in. They just need a place, and then like you find a place that just matches, and you're like, okay, well, like, you know, I don't even need to list this one because generally they still like to list it, but it speeds up the process massively, which is a big thing when you're investing, right? Like if you have a month of vacancy, but that's another thing maybe we just touch on quickly is like, vacancy is kind of like the enemy in this situation, but at the same time, like if you're locking in somebody that could be your tenant for 10 years and they're not good, would you sacrifice a month of rent for a good tenant? And I've heard arguments on both sides, kind of some saying like, you know, you have to have no vacancy and it's better to lower the rent and get somebody in quick or whatever. And then other people say like, you know, I'd rather let the unit sit for a month or two and find someone good at the price I want because they could be here forever. And so that's up to you too, but that's another thing to consider. Yeah, it's not strictly a math question. Like part of it is, you know, if you're going to have a vacancy of 1 month every 3 years, then you sort of build your rent to suit that. I mean, market rent is market rent, so you can't be too far off of that. But you also need to consider, like, you know, if you have the ideal situation where every 3 years you've got a new tenant, and there's a month. But what about the inverse? If you have a bad tenant who destroys your place and doesn't pay rent, like then it's worth, like, there's no question it's worth it to let it sit for 2 months. Till you find the right tenant. So it's like risk analysis. Right? And there is seasonality to this. Like there's seasonality to the real estate market in terms of buying a house. Like there's more listings a certain time of the year, right? In the spring, a lot of people like to move. It's the same thing with renters and with vacancies. like a lot more people. Like, would you like to move over Christmas and New Year's? Probably not, right? So to try and find,
unless you had to.
Yeah. So to try and find tenants in the winter months when most people don't want to move if they can avoid it, or there's less reasons to move. Like people move more frequently when they go to school or when their kids go to school. Like, so there's these kind of seasonalities to the market. And if you're off season and somebody is moving, like just be a little bit more aware, because there might be a reason they have to move, right? Like they're getting kicked out or they're getting evicted for a reason out of this place, and they need a place in January 1, right? And it's always, it's tough to pinpoint those situations, but they do come up, right? And more frequently in the off season when people are like, they have to move for a reason. They're not just like choosing to move in the middle of February.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. And it's just another clue when you're dealing with people.
Sweet. What do we do? Talk about short-term rentals next time?
Yeah, I think, we're just going to make this a series.
My brain has been fully picked by you, so.
Delicious.
Next time, I will pick Mark's brain, small though it may be. It is delectable. No, it is full of stories about short and midterm tenant screening, and what we can do to make sure that if we're doing Airbnb or a short-term strategy, midterm being like, a couple months, what can we do to find the best tenant? And let's jump into that next time.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Two Stewards Show. If you like my voice better, click subscribe.
And if you like my voice better, click share.
If you like both, give us a 5-star rating.
To interact with the show, feel free to reach out at hello@twostewards.ca.
We will see you in the next episode. In the meantime, steward your wealth wisely.